Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Griffin Report podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Della Penna. First time we've done a Zoom here, as well as having our first alumni in the building. We are lucky to have a Canisius Swim Dive program member in the early 2010s who now works for the University of Texas Longhorns as one of the youngest chief financial officers in all of college sports. Give it up for Mr. Rob Novak. It's great to have you on. I'm excited to talk to you.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. So you were a Buffalo guy growing up, went to Will North. Was swimming always your go-to sport, or growing up, did you play multiple sports?
Yeah, fair question. I played quite a few things before I figured out that swimming was my niche. So I was pretty undersized. I started high school like 4'10" and maybe like 90 pounds. And I was playing like lacrosse and hockey and soccer, not doing too well. So I made the switch over to swimming, and then the next year I was 6'2", and pretty great at swimming, and it kind of worked out from there. So Will North had an awesome swim team. I spent a lot of time swimming at UB from like the club swimming scene, and then got good enough to get noticed from a Division I perspective.
That is crazy. So you grew up over a foot in 1 year.
Yes.
Wow. That is absurd.
It helps out with swimming for sure, right?
Yeah, it has
less strokes and everything else. Yeah. And being 4'9" and like trying to do some physical sports wasn't too great. So
right. I mean, even for me, like I remember my like 8th to 9th grade growth spurt was like 6-7 inches. That was like, oh my gosh, like, oh my, your Griff, you got so tall. That is absurd. But you talked about kind of like your high school scene. You were part of that program for 4 years at Will North. What was the recruiting process like for you to get noticed by Canisius? And then what kind of took Canisius, out of the pack and why you ultimately chose to go to Canisius?
Yeah, definitely. So my junior year, like recruiting wise, looking at a bunch of different schools and wasn't sure Canisius was going to be the place for me. And then probably fall of my senior year, they made a coaching change and brought in Scott Vanderzell, who's still the head coach now. Scott had been at Titans my whole swimming career. So I was at another club, but I had a lot of friends that swam at Titans. And so I got the call right away. Scott was like, hey, early recruiting period, let's get you on campus. Did a recruiting visit and was kind of surprised, right? Like you're a kid from Buffalo. You're like, I want to go far away for school. And pretty much every experience I had, any person I met, anything I worked with, I was like, this is the place I want to be. So it was a really awesome weekend. And then I spent a bunch of time with the accounting professor. So at the time, Dr. Kermis was still there and gave his whole spiel on the accounting program. He's like, you can be great at 2 things in college. You can swim, you can do accounting, you can have any job you want. And you left campus and we're like, wow, this is awesome. Like great academic program, great athletic program, new coach, going to kind of figure everything out. And so probably a week and a half later, I signed my national letter and then I had to fill out my application to go to Canisius. I was like, okay, I've decided I'm going to swim there. Probably have to do all the academic stuff to like actually get in. Right. So that was pretty awesome. And the rest is kind of history with Scott. I had an awesome 4 years and we just got progressively better. I mean, we were the second worst team in the MAC my freshman year, and then went to second place my sophomore year. And that was probably the defining moment where we really started getting rolling and recruiting high caliber kids to come in and make us the program we are today.
And you were one of those key pieces as well. I don't want you to sell yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Being one of the best long distance swimmers in recent memory in that program. Truthfully, won 4 events in the 1,000 meters. So how proud of you of your tenure at Canisius swimming wise? You had to be pretty proud of that.
It was incredible.
How great you did.
Being Scott's first recruit, signing an early signing period, which is kind of a new concept probably back in the day, and then starting to get momentum. So Matt Mosinger, Tyler Carver, a lot of guys that I grew up with were like, okay, people are going to this program. Like, let's all go there and start to win. And then you got in there. And I remember like our freshman year, the women's team had maybe 9 student athletes. And so the synchro girls were swimming with us. And we were like, holy cow, we're busting like 10 hours to swim meets. We barely have enough people. And then that next class came in. And then we all were like, okay, we can really do this. Like we can start recruiting teammates. We can build a culture. We can do awesome things. And every year it got better and better. And it was more fun because when you got to Mac's freshman year, everyone was like the nicest person in the building to you. They're like, oh, it's Canisius, like no big deal. And then we started smoking people in some races and they were like, wow, okay, maybe we're not going to be so nice at the Griffs. Yeah. And then next year we were in second place and all of a sudden it got pretty hostile. And we started recruiting against those programs and it was an incredible experience. I think being around people that want to do the same thing, want to do great things, and kind of figuring out how to do it was an awesome setup for where I'm at in my career. And if not for probably that early experience, I probably wouldn't be the sport administrator I am today. I mean, going into a program, right, figuring out how to work with student athletes and coaches and get it all together. My student athlete experience shaped that for me.
And what was that dynamic like? Because now from my own perspective, I see both the men's and women's swim and dive program be extremely close, but there's also so many of them. You just said that there were, you're piecing together a roster and combining both for co-ed essentially. So what was that dynamic like for you to start out with having limited numbers to then, like you said, you're being a senior and now you have a full squad?
Yeah. I mean, it was awesome from a training perspective. I think one of the benefits of a swim program is getting the co-ed training. So you've got a distance freestyle lane, or at the time when I was a freshman, we were so low on numbers. It was butterfly and distance freestyle, which is like the rarest combo. Mm-hmm. So Erica Vitale, who swam for us, Ben Mosinger, Kevin Ernst, and then myself, got the middle of the pool and just like went after it every day. And so you start doing that, and then it starts to change what the rest of the pool looks like, right? Who you're training with, how you're pushing each other, what goes on in practice. All of a sudden, the weight room gets way more competitive. Now people are doing rehab in the training room. Everyone's watching what they're doing, making sure they're contributing to the team. And so it all started to stack. And that culture in that pool, the CAC is a special place. I mean, it's a 6-lane pool. And my freshman year, it had these awful orange lights that were like a dungeon. And it was pretty crazy. And then the next year, Bill Maher hooked us up big time and got some pretty fancy lights and made some pretty big improvements to the pool. So when you're training every day, right, you're getting in there at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, swimming for an hour or two or lifting, and then you're back there for 2-3 hours in the afternoon. You spent a lot of time in lane 3. It was awesome.
Yeah. And you alluded to in the last question that you wouldn't be the sport administrator that you are today if it wasn't for those experiences. Could you just expand on that a little bit? What specifically has made you better with your current job?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, there are really talented student athletes that I get to work with every day. I mean, we're at the University of Texas having the opportunity to recruit Olympians. And so I always laugh a little bit when they're like, oh, it's so awesome. We were both like collegiate swimmers. And like, absolutely. We both swam Division I. That's so awesome. Yeah. But like, you also went to the Olympics and, like racked up a couple gold medals. So it's a little different in my mind. But awesome. I think the big piece for me was part of the sell at Canisius as a recruit and then really being there on campus was everyone cared. So if you were having a bad day and you were wearing it on your face, like someone was going to stop you. So whether it was Tracy Murphy, who was our SWA at the time, or Annie Dobies, who ran all of our academic stuff, everyone wanted you to succeed. And as you started to become an administrator, you started to figure out how much that mattered, right? It wasn't, there's great coaches, great student athletes, great camaraderie, but when you're taking 18 credit hours a semester and you're at this incredibly challenging academic institution and you're trying to push yourself to perform in athletics, whether it's swimming or whatever sport you're doing, it gets really challenging, right? And so you look for this escape or this commonality or this person to talk to. And so I think first and foremost for me as an administrator was, okay, be that person, be present, right? Like make sure your student athletes know who you are, be someone outside of the equation of the day-to-day. So I'm not in the weight room, I'm not on the field when they're practicing, but I'm traveling with them. We're talking about careers. We're talking about what we do, talking about life. And that starts to build this trust that when you need something or you want to step away from it or you want to figure something else out, there's people you can go talk to. And so that really just fundamental baseline of like being a good human, being a great administrator, that was all formidable for me at Canisius. Then you get into, hey, the season's not going the way I want it to be, right? Or I'm not performing at the level I want. What do you do? How do you reset? And so the benefit of being here is we have a million resources we can help you with, behavioral health, great sports medicine, sports science, all of that. A lot of that we did on our own. Like we had great coaches and great athletic trainers and learned how to cope with that stuff. So I think being present for my student athletes here, talking about my student athlete experience, trying to balance everything, all of that really prepared me for the job I have now.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And even with some of the job titles and specifically some of the personnel at Canisius has changed, but that remains constant. It's, there's always, if you talk to current athletes, other athletes that maybe just graduated, the fact stays the same. So that's great to hear in your experience as well. But obviously academics were a huge part of your, tenure at Canisius too. What was the dynamic like for you? Again, you talked sometimes those 18 credit hours, 18 credit semesters can get pretty crazy. And then on top of that, you're playing a Division I sport. So at first, what was that balance like for you? And then throughout your 4 years, the accounting program is very tough. So that had to be quite the first adjustment for you.
Yeah, I think there's no preparation for failure like Canisius accounting. So I think the concept, and even when I explain it to people here, they get blown away. But I mean, every exam you take, there's a sign drop slip at the top being like, hey, if this isn't for you, like there are some awesome major here. But if it is, like, step it up. Like, let's get this done. And so you get into accounting sophomore year and you have these super awesome professors that really teach you how to figure things out on your own, right? I think a lot of coursework, people take slide decks, they talk to you what's going on. And the Canisius accounting professors were like, here is a disaster and you are going to figure out how to solve it. And you're going to do that every day until you're ready to do this in real life. And I cannot thank them enough for that now. I would say that the last 3 years of college, when I was doing that coursework, I probably wasn't as happy or appreciative, but it's paid dividends. And so Dr. Davis, Dr. O'Donnell, I mean, these guys set up an incredible program. And then it was always comical to me because you can't miss class, right? And they would give this whole spiel at the beginning, like, if you miss class, you're going to fail. It's never going to work out for you. You got to take this seriously. And so I would panic to roll up there and be like, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but I have like 4 swim meets this semester. And I feel like I have to be at those. And they're like, yeah, that's incredible. Like, life will be fine. Like, here's the stuff you need to do. And so you realize all of a sudden, like, you have these great advocates in economics professors and accounting professors who knew that you were trying to be awesome at every aspect of college and wanted you to succeed in class, but they weren't going to make it easy on you, right? So just because you weren't there didn't mean that it all went away. But they were going to make sure that you had enough balance to succeed. And so really appreciative of them pushing me. It was just an incredible educational experience.
When did you realize that maybe you wanted to tailor your degree into sports, or even if it wasn't going to be collegiate athletics, that you were going to take that next step into, college athletics?
Yeah. So going back to our recruiting story. So I was walking around my sophomore year, or probably end of my freshman year, giving a tour to some of our recruits. And I was like, this is awesome. Let me tell you about all these awesome things. Student athlete, what am I trying to say? Study hall, going to the dorms, like how we move around. The tunnels are obviously key in the middle of the winter, right? There are some huge selling points of being on the quad. And this woman was following us around. And I was like, this is so strange. Like, she just kept following us and following us and following us. And it happened to be Molly, who was the director of undergraduate admissions at the time. And so after we finished our recruiting visit, Molly was like, hey, I have no idea who you are, but you gave like this amazing tour. And I think you should come work in admissions and just help all of the coaches with their student athlete tours.
Right.
I'm like a college kid that obviously is going to take money, like literally anywhere you can go, right, and work. And was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I started to realize, like, okay, all these people work on a college campus and they absolutely love it. I mean, I think that's one of the cool things about Canisius is everyone wants to be there. They want to help people. And so pretty boldly, I walked into Jude Caserta's office. She's the longtime business manager and associate AD for athletics, and said, and I knew her. Her son and I swam together our entire life growing up. Her niece was on the swim team at the time. And I was like, I think I want your job. And so after she like initially wanted to kick me out of her office, I was like, okay, sit down and let's talk about this. Let's figure this out. And so that was the foray into, hey, this is a real career. Like, I can do the things that I love in accounting, but work as hard and as much as I want to for something that I'm super passionate about, where other people have helped me succeed. And that was the balance where my internships in public accounting in Buffalo, New York, didn't really feel like that was going to make me want to do it every day. And so Jude got me in the door. I started working with her, Bill, and Tracy. I had the opportunity to build a textbook return program, analyze our travel, how we scheduled in sports, worked on our apparel deal. I mean, crazy opportunities for sophomore, junior, senior in college. And they just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And to their credit, it all helped prepare me for a career. And then Canisius has, and I hope they still have it, but it's this Canisius Earning Excellence Program, SEEP. And so if you work with the provost, right, you can pursue your academic research field on campus and get paid for it. And so my junior and senior year, I had convinced our VP of academic affairs that, okay, I have all this accounting knowledge. I have all this experience that I want to pursue. And I want to work in the athletic department and figure out how to mix these two things together and make a career out of it. And got the okay. And the rest is kind of history from there. I mean, Bill and Jude and Tracy gave me every opportunity you could think of to learn about the industry and what to do and not to do and how to be a competent administrator and manage a budget. And so I walked out of Canisius at 21 with a master's degree, thanks to Dr. O'Rourke, 2 accounting degrees, and really 3+ years of nearly full-time experience working and running an athletic department. And you're just not going to get that anywhere else.
Yeah, that's outrageous. Like, just to think about that. And even me, like, it's kind of like a weird place for me because I'm still in my undergrad working for the athletic department. It's mostly like you're full-time or you're a GA. So I can kind of relate to that as well. Also to giving tours. I love giving tours. It's always like my goal is like, how can I help this person come here and have a great experience? But no, that's really cool. So after you left Canisius and you have all this great knowledge and you have all these degrees, what was the next step for you to then propel yourself to Texas where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So I want to say that it was like the easiest thing in the world. Like I had all this experience and I got a job right away. And I had probably a 3-month period where I was interviewing everywhere I could be, trying to find the right opportunity. And so Bill had helped me get an aquatics director job at Lancaster Country Club. So I was running a swim team, learned a swim program, running the pool, all the things out there. And Mark Mayer, the general manager, used to be the director of football operations at Buffalo back when Bill was their AD. So, it's a really small like community in sports in general, and then certainly in Western New York. So I had a great opportunity to work on my management skills, stay in Buffalo and continue to interview. And so a job at American University came up as a business assistant. And I was like, all right, I know nothing about Washington, D.C. or American University, but they have swimming. And like 3 people on the website used to work at the MAC. And so let's figure this out. So I applied for the job, and then the normal show, like talk to Jude, talk to Tracy, talk to Bill. And they started making calls saying like, what's going on with this job? What can we do to help Rob? And next thing I know, I have an interview. And so I get to fly down to Washington, D.C., which is like the coolest thing, right? I've lived in Buffalo my entire life, put on a suit, fly down to D.C., meet with all these people. And every conversation I had felt as organic and awesome as my recruiting experience, my student athlete experience at Canisius. And so I left there being like, I really hope this works out. And the next day I get a phone call and all of a sudden have a job in DC. So packing up my entire life, putting it in my SUV, finding an apartment. They had hired a new athletic director, new men's basketball coach, new women's basketball coach, business assistant, obviously not the key position there, and a new assistant strength coach. So I was like living with a strength coach, finding a place in DC, and then got my career rolling. And the whole women's basketball staff had come in from Marist. So talk about like, there's all these MAC connections and everything going on. And then day one, there's a little bit of a rivalry between the Canisius swimmer and the Marist women's basketball team about who is working with who in the athletic department. So that's what got me from Canisius into American, where I got to spend the first 2 years of my career. And it was an awesome experience.
And then after American, how many years were in between then you making yourself to go with the Longhorns?
So at the time I was with AU, it was a pretty pivotal moment in college athletics. So it was a huge run of conference realignment. You're talking about A&M and Missouri leaving the Big 12 conference, starting to see changes across the board. So the Big 12 conference was doing a like 4-on-1 college sports, and they'd done their first one in Manhattan. The second one was in DC at the Washington Press Corps. And so our assistant director of compliance had a family friend, and he got us in. It's a really small event. And so I sit down at my table, and it's Steve Patterson, the men's athletic director, Chris Plonsky, the women's athletic director at Texas, Chris Delcani, who was the AD at TCU at the time, and then the chief communications officer of the USOC. So like the craziest of flukes, right? There's only 10 tables. So you're going to have to sit with someone, right?
Right.
And that's the group I sat with. And CP and Steve were like, hey, there's always jobs open at Texas. Like talk to Dave Marmion, like apply for a job. So sure enough, there was an accounting job open, and Jude, who is like one of the most reliable and meaningful members of CABMA, our governing board for college business managers, had known Dave for like 20 years. And so again, you have this familiarity of the sports industry where Jude knows what a talented administrator Dave is, the type of people he hires. And so next thing I know, I'm on a flight to Austin, Texas. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to Texas. I've never been there before. It doesn't make any sense. Met with Dave, met with CP and Steve, met with Eddie Reese, the swim coach, of course, right? They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I left Austin with a job. And so January 5th, 2015, I had driven from DC to Buffalo for Christmas and then Buffalo all the way down to Austin. And then from there, I spent probably 8 months as an accountant for travel. So my job was to oversee the other travel accountants, work with the Anthony travel team, and modernize a group that was like doing paper expense reports. Like people would bring in bankers boxes full of receipts from these football trips, and you'd be figuring out how to pay a million things. So being in a small school, being efficient, helped me build a name for myself in this huge business office because I knew where you could start saving money and how to do things pretty efficiently. And then Eric George at the time had just left to be CFO at Clemson. And so Dave gave me an opportunity to run the athletic department budget. So at 23 years old, I took over as assistant business manager, largest athletic department budget in the country, which is a huge leap of faith, right? Like 23-year-old kid, been there 8 months, like, let's figure it out. And then every opportunity kind of followed and built on that. And a lot of it had to do with, I knew what you wanted the student athlete experience to be. I knew how you wanted to treat other administrators, and I knew how to save money and do things efficiently in an athletic department that at the time was pretty big and maybe a little antiquated in the way that we were running our budget. And so each of those things continued to build. And so I had done that job for about a year and a half. And then our new men's athletic director at the time and Dave said, hey, we're going to change some leadership at the concert venue. We'd like you to be CFO. So I'm like 25 years old, and like, it's the most active concert venue in America on a college campus. Just go on over there and figure out what's going on. So I picked up a staff and went over there. And it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. I mean, we were doing 35 major concerts a year. So you're in a budget meeting with a soccer coach in the morning, and at night there's like a Shania Twain concert, and I'm there at 2 a.m. settling. Right. And so you're in Austin, Texas, live music capital of the world. You're working in a concert venue. You're working in an athletic department. And then our current leadership came in. So December of 16, Chris Dalcani came in. A couple months later, Sean Eichhorst. And at that point, we had built a new medical school, or started a medical school and built it next to the arena, and said, hey, we need a new basketball arena. Like, this doesn't work. You can't have an emergency room and a concert venue next to each other. So they put together a small team. So Sean, Chris, and myself from the athletic department started the Moody Center project. And so the next kind of 2 years of my career were taking all the skills I learned from the Frank Irwin Center, how to negotiate a concert deal, how to run that business, and negotiate that into what is right now the Moody Center. So top 3 concert venues in America, competing with LA and New York. We have 125 shows a year, and it's 2 feet down from my office in the football stadium. And it opened in April this year. So we did a soft open April 18th and our first full concert on the 19th. And it's been an incredible experience. And so sprinkled in there, you have COVID, all sorts of other things. And so had an opportunity to supervise men's and women's tennis. Both teams won a national championship. Since then, I've moved over to softball, men's and women's golf. Men's golf won this year. Softball was national runner-up. Just really fortunate opportunity to work with incredible coaches, incredible student athletes, run capital projects, supervise the development of an arena, anything you can think of. And then for me, the really fulfilling part is hiring and building this incredibly talented staff. So once you're in charge, right, you've got to find people that are going to challenge you as a leader and run this great organization. And so the last 18 months have really been focused on that. And it's the most fun. You get to hire really awesome people and help them move roadblocks, right, that you faced earlier in your career. And you can't make them go away, right? But you can give them some tips to get through it. And so that's really where I sit today at Texas as a CFO.
And you're doing all this at such a young age too. Like, have you been able to kind of take a step back and just realize the amount of success that you've had? You just said 3 national championships in 1 year. Like that's not common stuff for anybody.
No, not at all. I mean, I think that, and on top of that, so just to add, so CABMA, the organization I talked about, in 2018, Jude was named Collegiate Athletic Business Manager of the Year. So I got to see, like, in my career at Texas, got to be there as we gave her the award. It was just this incredible moment. And then 2 years later, I was voted into what will ultimately become the president of that group. So I was 3rd vice president last year, 2nd VP this year. And so we got to do Jude's retirement celebration at our convention this year. So after 2 years of COVID breaks,
Right.
you bring everyone back. And so I think that was the first time that it was really full circle for me. Bill, Tracy, Jude, and I were all in the same place. We're all at convention celebrating Jude's career. And you're just like, holy cow, this came fast. This is awesome. And you're looking around the room and there's just hundreds of thousands of administrators, right? All aspects of collegiate athletics, all of the divisions, everything that's going on. And I'm standing there with my folks from Canisius and I'm just like, this is the best decision I've ever made, right? Like you go all the way back to Scott getting the job and choosing to sign there. And so, yeah, I'm not one to step back a lot. You can probably tell I probably move pretty speedily, right, through things. But that was the first real moment of reflection where I was like, holy cow, this has been an awesome ride.
And you have to think too, some of the teams you did mention with the tennis and golfs, you have to still have some involvement with swimming now, right? As a swimming guy, or are you hands off with it, right?
Always. Yeah. I think that, so our Chris, our athletic director, was a track student athlete. And obviously with my swimming background, there's quite a spirit of competition between swimming and track. I mean, Eddie is the greatest coach ever, in my opinion, in the history of NCAA sports. He's won 14 national championships at Texas. I've gotten to be on the deck for 11, 12, 13, and 14. I mean, just an incredible experience. We hosted the 2019 championship on the men's and women's side where I got to be the assistant meet director. So yeah, there's no shortage of swimming exposure, but it's not my primary focus, which is fair, right? I think if I spent all my time on swimming and accounting, that'd be a pretty narrow pathway for me. So I think getting to work with different sports, running different championships, seeing different facilities, different donor bases, all of that.
Right.
I'm at every swimming thing I can be at, including finding my way to their championship every year. But it's a good balance.
And in the past few years, obviously college sports has been ever growing in its own right, but now with NIL deals and also with, the COVID extra year of eligibility for some of these athletes, how has that changed your day-to-day operations, if at all, for what you're doing currently?
Yeah, definitely. I think NIL is going to vary greatly by, size of university, kind of scope of athletic department, and then what state you're in. So for us, the state of Texas is pretty restrictive on what we have access to and kind of what we do. So from our perspective, we're really supporting our athletics compliance group. Who are the companies you're working with? How are you structuring this? I think from a business side, everyone expected to see this huge drop off of revenue, or it was going to be the end of college sports. And that's not where we're at. We're far from that. I think when you go through COVID, you have to understand every dollar going in and every dollar going out. And we had really materialized everything that made us exist. So there's no change that I feel that we're ill prepared for. I think we have to make decisions right about what's the most important to us. But NIL has been a win for our student athletes. I think on top of that, what's been a huge win for them has been the academic enhancement benefit that's come from the Alston Supreme Court ruling. We were one of the few athletic departments that right away went and funded that. And so you look at, you're recruiting student athletes from all over the world, you're giving them access to scholarships, and outside of the big sports, it's still equivalency, right? So you may carry 38 guys on a men's swimming and diving team, but you have 9.9 scholarships to figure that out. So the idea that we can help them with their expenses and really invest in them, continue to expand our dining hall for student athletes, those things matter the most. On top of that, we have a really exciting move to the SEC. So one of the biggest things for me is, how do I get all of my student athletes to a completely different geographic footprint, right? We're not busing or driving anymore. So how are we chartering? What do we have access to? What kind of deals are we going to strike with the airline? So those things really matter the most right now. Outside of that, I think it's just fun. You're not doing the same thing twice. And so you have a really talented group of people. Everyone wants to figure it out. And we're going to do everything we can to help our student athletes be the best people they can be.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue into my next question. It was going to be about the move to the SEC. That's going to be effective in 2025. Where were you when that news first broke, and how has that also, changed your job? That's not a normal move in any way, shape, or form either.
Yeah, I think that we were really measured in our approach, and we have a really talented group of leaders. So in our president, our VP and athletic director, and then our deputy AD, those three individuals know the best thing that we can do as a university. And we had a lot of time together throughout the COVID stretch to figure out what we really needed long-term. So when the news broke, I had a whole bunch of staff that were surprised and excited and curious what was going on. And so that was a really cool opportunity. The student athletes, especially in a lot of sports that they may not be in the most competitive environment right now, just based on our peers not sponsoring that sport at the highest level, or having multiple institutions that have it. Like swimming and diving has 2 other men's programs in our current conference. And so you get to move to the SEC and it's a premier sport. It's a really exciting opportunity for them. So my role is measuring resources, right? We have the largest budget in the country, but we're going to pick up all these new expenses. So helping our coaches understand where they want to invest and what we want to do as an organization, that's really our priority. It's fun to do it in tandem with Oklahoma. While they are our biggest rival on the field, we are very good friends with them as administrators. So we spend a lot of time together. We figure these things out in groups. And then the SEC group has been super welcoming for us to figure out how to operate. I mean, no different than us going to them. They have to come to us a whole lot more often. And so that's been a really fun opportunity. I think each of my sports that's hit the road, I've spent a lot of time with them. So it's down in Alabama for 3 or 4 days. Even got to catch up with a couple of folks from Buffalo that now work in their athletic department. So small world, right? But a lot of fun with that transition.
Yeah, that's very cool. And this will segue into our last question of the day. What pieces of advice would you give to maybe current Canisius student athletes or other people at Canisius that would like to pursue a career in college athletics, or specifically like a role that you currently have?
Yeah, definitely. I think first and foremost, if you're at Canisius, lean into every opportunity in front of you. There's no person there that doesn't want to help you succeed and doesn't want to help you figure it out. And so maybe not storm every person into Jude's office and try and say that you want her job, right? But you could probably soften that approach and find quite a few administrators that want to help you succeed. And I think you have to be very okay with volunteering and putting the work in to get the most amount of opportunity, right? I think when you look at the industry, there's all these crazy titles and all these different things that people want. And at the end of the day, if you want to do this career, you need to figure out the 2 or 3 things that matter the most to you, and you need to keep those at the forefront. And so if it's your student athlete experience, it's your passion for sports, or it's a university you want to work for, whatever it is you hold in high regard, you need to hold on to that tight, and then you need to lean into it and work as hard as you possibly can. I think getting a skill set outside of just generally that you enjoy sports, so whether it's accounting or marketing or communications or whatever that principal field is, it matters, especially if you move into a department that can be siloed like ours. I have a lot of talented folks, but I also need them to be accounting folks. That's our first, job. So I think that's the biggest thing. And Buffalo is an incredible place. So there are a lot of businesses, a lot of places that you can get incredible experience and people that care deeply about Canisius. So if you leave Western New York after 4 years and you haven't had multiple internships and people in your corner, you missed a big opportunity. So don't find yourself in that position. Lean on these administrators. Go to the Griffs Center, walk into athletics, talk to your professors, and ask the questions to help you figure this out. And the earlier you do it, the better.
Yeah. That's amazing advice, Rob. I can't thank you enough for coming on here today. Fantastic story just in general, and so much success. And we're looking to see you continue to climb the ranks and more success as UT continues to reign supreme, I guess you can say, and move into the SEC. So thank you very much.
For sure. Thank you for having me.